Hi, and welcome back to this video series called the Unlast Days of Jesus. My name is Michael Venema, and I'm so grateful that you're able to join in. So welcome, and please don't forget to subscribe and to share and to like and those good things at the end of our video in case I forget to mention it later on. So in this series, we're looking at the last week of Jesus' life. And the reason I call it the Unlast Days of Jesus is because the story has a surprising ending, which you are probably familiar with, but we'll get to it when we get there. The series is taking a few more videos than I originally thought because it does take a while to unpack the story, and I don't want to hurry it along too quickly. So let's dive in and keep moving into the story. We're looking at Mark's version of Jesus' life, and so the end of Mark's gospel. Gospel means good news, God's good news. And we're looking at chapter 14. So there's chapter 14, 15, and 16 to go yet. So chapter 14, by this time, Jesus has gotten into quite a bit of trouble. I think in one of the earlier videos I mentioned that in a sense he kind of triggers his own execution by deeply offending the temple tradition and those who saw themselves as the guardians of the Jewish temple tradition. They saw themselves as being the guardians of God's people and God's truths for the people. So, and on some level, they were not ill motivated, but we do discover in the accounts of Jesus' life that they definitely resorted to some very ungodly methods of dealing with Jesus, and this is going to really climax in these closing chapters of the story of Jesus' life. So Mark chapter 14, again, Jesus is now in serious hot water. His disciples have also been discussing with him in chapter 13 what's going to happen, what's God's timetable for the dramatic actions which they were hoping that God would bring about, which I think meant for them freedom from the oppression of the Roman occupiers and other difficulties that the Jewish people were having. And when would God's great leader show up to lead God's people into a new day? And Jesus ends up saying a few things which kind of, I think, boil down to this. Don't get too caught up in trying to figure out God's timetable. We can't really know when God's going to return to make everything different and new. It will happen when it happens. And he says to his disciples, you'll see it when you see it. And in the meantime, you've got one basic job, and that is to live faithfully and to carry on with the mission that Jesus is in the process of bequeathing to his disciples. So now we're at the beginning of chapter 14. I'm going to read some parts of it and make a few comments. I'll take it kind of section by section. If you've got it in front of you, you will see that there's quite a few sections. And I'm using a version of the Bible called The Message, which some people don't like because it can sound a bit casual, but I think it very nicely picks up on the dynamism of a lot of the things that are happening in the Bible stories. So Mark chapter 14. In only 2 days, the 8-day festival of Passover and the feast of unleavened bread would begin. So this was the annual Jewish celebration of the Passover celebration, when they would remember that God had rescued the Jewish people, the Israelites, from the cruel Egyptians many, many years earlier. And that rescue involved God sending an angel of judgment to the Egyptian slave masters who had been killing the Israelites, and they would now get some of their own medicine, so to speak, although that sounds a bit flippant. But anyway, the angel passed over the homes of the Israelites. And in the story, these homes have the blood of a slain lamb painted on their door frames, so that the angel knows that this is the community of the Israelites. The slave camps pass over that part of Egypt and go on to the Egyptians themselves. And this was the pivotal event in which the Egyptians would finally say to the Israelites, "Go, it's time for you to leave." So it's a celebration of the deliverance of the people of God from the cruel hand of the Egyptians. And this was always remembered by the Jewish people, and still is in the Jewish community, as the formative event where God established himself with his people as their God, and where he embraced the people as his people that he would take care of, and that he would lead through the desert and into the land of Israel. So a very important annual celebration for the Israelites, for the Jewish people. This is happening right now. So the high priests and religion scholars, I'm continuing to read, were looking for a way that they could seize Jesus by stealth and kill him. They agreed that it should not be done during Passover week. And then there's a quotation, "We don't want the crowds up in arms." So this is a little reflection of the fact that Jesus is quite popular, and there are thousands, I think tens of thousands, of Jewish pilgrims from all over the region, particularly Israel, but also other regions to the north and over into Egypt, and also a bit to the east, where the Jewish people are, so to speak, scattered and living in their different communities. They've all gathered in Jerusalem, maybe not all of them, but a large number making pilgrimages to Jerusalem for this great Passover celebration. And the leaders, the high priests and so on, can't afford to have all the people turn against them, so they want to do Jesus in by stealth, out of sight of the people. So they're looking for a way. So they've had a meeting, and they're looking for a way to take care of Jesus, who they see as a real threat. And if you've seen some of the previous videos, I've explained why Jesus is seen by them as a tremendous threat to the Jewish faith and the Jewish people. Now, Jesus was at Bethany, so that's a nearby town. I think it's about 2 miles, about 3 kilometers away from the city of Jerusalem itself. Jesus was at Bethany, a guest of Simon the leper. While he was eating dinner, a woman came up carrying a bottle of very expensive perfume. Opening the bottle, she poured it on his head. Some of the guests became furious among themselves. "That's criminal, a sheer waste. This perfume could have been sold for well over a year's wages and handed out to the poor." They swelled up in anger, nearly bursting with indignation over her. Well, I think this paragraph also deserves a little bit of unpacking. So I don't think we know anything about Simon the leper, except that this is the one occasion in which he is named, and it's kind of interesting, a lot of these little personal details which attest to the eyewitness quality of the story that we're reading. People are angry because, well, sometimes people also in our own modern times say, "Oh, well, take this or that church. It seems to have so much wealth in buildings and works of art and gold and expensive things. All that could be sold and the money given to the poor," which in a sense is true. And so this is the kind of sentiment that the people are expressing when they see this woman, so to speak, wasting this expensive perfume by just pouring it out when she could have offered it to be sold and the money given to the needy. So they're angry. Anyway, Jesus, I maybe won't read it word for word, but he says, "Leave her alone. You're always going to have opportunity to help the poor. You have had in the past, you do now, and you will in the future. So don't worry about that too much. But the important thing that's going on here that Jesus says to the other people in the house of Simon the leper, the important thing that's going on here is that she is in a way preparing me for my death, for my burial. What does he mean? Well, in those days, the way to provide a proper, dignified burial for a Jewish person was to wrap the body in grave clothes and then pour perfume on the body. I think that this is a way of dealing with the odor of the decay of the body. I'm not totally sure, but it is a way of giving the body a proper, dignified burial. So Jesus is kind of saying she is kind of preparing me without maybe even knowing it for what's coming down the road. Now, another thing to kind of know about this thing where she is pouring perfume on Jesus is that Jesus is considered to be the Messiah, or the Greek word is Christ, and the Jewish word Messiah, it means chosen one, but anointed one. So you kind of get the connection. And back in the pre-Jesus parts of the Bible in the Old Testament, sometimes people were anointed because they were specially chosen by God to lead the people. So you can kind of see like a layering of things going on here, even in this what looks like a very simple, although quite dramatic story. And then Jesus kind of closes off this conversation by saying, wherever my story is told, what this woman has done will be remembered. So I suppose that's coming true right now, even as we're talking about it. Well, now the story takes on a bit of a darker turn because we come to the actions of Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the cabal of high priests determined to betray Jesus. Now, I don't know if this thing with the woman kind of functioned as kind of a trigger for Judas, that Judas thought, Jesus is being totally unrealistic. Judas, of course, doesn't know what Christians around the planet know today, which is that Jesus died, but also would have returned from death. And so Judas doesn't know that all that's going to happen. He's in the moment. And I think he's also partly influenced by some of the opposition to Jesus, and maybe he is also concerned that Jesus is going off the rails and that he's going to generate something that's going to end up in a big tragedy for the Jewish people. So Judas has it in his mind to betray Jesus, and as we know, the high priests and so on were looking for a way by stealth, out of sight of the people, to deal with Jesus. And so he goes to the high priests, and in the translation I've got, it says they couldn't believe their ears, and they promised to pay him well. So Judas leaves with a promise of payment and with the intention of looking for an opportune time when Jesus could be taken into custody, kind of out of sight of the people, and dealt with. So let's see what happens. Let's see how Judas's plan unfolds or not as the story continues. So let's keep going here. Then we get to what's called the first of the days of unleavened bread. And so what's going to happen is that the Jewish people are going to gather in Jerusalem, I think in their homes and different places, and they're going to celebrate the Passover meal, just as it was celebrated many years earlier in Egypt on that dramatic night of deliverance that I told you about a few minutes earlier. And during that Passover night, what happened was that the Israelite people were in their homes, and they were dressed, ready for travel, and they had flatbread for themselves, and they also were eating from the roast lamb that they had slaughtered, and the blood of which was on their doorposts. So this is all going to be celebrated also by Jesus and his disciples. So as I often mention, Jesus is thoroughly Jewish. His disciples are thoroughly Jewish. The first members of the early church, which were most of them house churches, some of them met in the temple in Jerusalem and other meeting places around the Middle East, but Jewish people for the most part, with a number of other non-Jewish people kind of starting to plug in, as they had been plugging into the Jewish faith anyway in the decades prior. So anyway, the Jewish people are gathering, and so Jesus, as you might expect, is going to preside over the meal. He's going to serve it. So as the story is told, Jesus sends his disciples, a couple of them, to prepare this upper room ahead of time, and so they do that, and they're in this what's called the upper room, and they're sharing the Passover meal. And during the meal, Jesus drops this bombshell that he is going to be betrayed by one of the people right there with him participating in the Passover meal. Now, they all go, "What, is it me? Is it me? Who is it, Jesus?" And I don't think it's in this particular version, but I think in the one or two of the other versions of Jesus' life, even Judas asks this question. And Jesus ends up saying, "Yes, this is going to happen. It's one of the people right here with me, with us together," and he says that he calls himself the Son of Man, which, as I've mentioned earlier videos, is Jesus' favorite self-designation, and he says the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of sinners. I want to just unpack that a little bit, because the Son of Man is a glorious figure from the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. And for the disciples to hear that the Son of Man, a glorious, godly figure with great authority, is going to be betrayed into the hands of sinners, well, that's what could you possibly mean by that, Jesus? That this glorious figure is going to be reduced into such a sorry state. So Judas goes on with what he needs to do. Jesus, nevertheless, also continues to serve the Passover meal, and he takes the flatbread and he blesses it and distributes it, and he says to the disciples, "This is my body." Now, remember, a few minutes ago I used this phrase of layering of meanings, and there's quite a bit of that going on here. So Jesus says, "This is my body." Well, typically, as I mentioned a minute ago, the Jewish people at the Passover celebration would be eating bread and eating remembering the Passover lamb that was eaten, right? So the Passover lamb, a slain animal, and now Jesus is drawing attention to what's being consumed, what's being eaten during the Passover meal, and he says, from now on, I want you to think of the Passover meal not in terms of the lamb that was slain and that was, the bits which were roasted and eaten, but I want you to think of you ingesting my body. So it's a powerful symbol, of unity with Jesus on the one hand, but also I think Jesus is kind of doing a daring reframing of the Passover meal. From now on, he's saying this meal is not anymore about the ingestion of lamb's meat, but it's no longer about the lamb that was slain, but it's about my coming death. You see what's going on? Right? The Passover celebration is a celebration of deliverance. And Jesus is setting the stage for a new deliverance for the Jewish people, but also for many others. A deliverance. And this is going to be generated not by the death of lambs, but by the sacrifice of his own self. So this is why I'm saying that Jesus is, in a daring way, reframing and what's the word I'm looking for? Redefining the Passover meal. The same with in the next phrase, he takes wine and distributes it, and he says, from now on, I want you to think of this as my blood. So kind of ingesting it as a powerful symbol of unity with Jesus, but also a remembrance of Jesus' death, his blood poured out. So that, I think, is a great spot to end. We're at about 20 minutes in, so you've been very patient, and I think this ending at this point of Jesus restating, reframing, redefining the Passover meal, which probably is the celebration of what's often called the Lord's Supper or communion or the Eucharist in the Christian church. So you can kind of see how the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist, communion is a direct carryover of the Jewish Passover meal, reframed, but a carryover. So on that note, we'll end things off from now. I will see you next time. Bye-bye for now. Thanks again so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and hit the notification bell so that you will know about new videos coming out. See you next time.